Are you relationship addicted? Relationship addiction is a maladaptive relationship pattern. Someone who is relationship addicted is essentially a person who's consistently involved in relationships that are one-sided and might even be emotionally destructive or abusive. In other words, we're talking about relationships with significant and repetitive boundary issues. Now, what drives a relationship or love addict is a compulsive need for emotional validation and approval. That perceived need then creates an unhealthy preoccupation with maintaining romantic relationships, often at the expense of their own independence and even well-being. Relationship addiction is another word for codependency. So codependent relationships are circular relationships. One person needs the other person, and that other person needs to be needed. So you might say that both people get something out of the relationship, at least subconsciously, but it's a dysfunctional relationship in the end. So before we go any further, let's define some important terms: dependence, codependence, and interdependence. Now, the difference between these things is significant and has everything to do with the status of one's sense of self. Let's unpack that. So dependence is a state in which one person relies on another for support in some area or way. For some, their very existence seems contingent on someone else's, like the way babies are dependent on adults for survival. In other cases, the dependent may be subordinate to the other party in the dynamic. For example, a dependent person may rely on or allow someone else to make decisions for them. So with dependence, that sense of self is absent. Now, codependence is a term for a pattern of relating in which a person puts the needs of others before their own. In other words, they give others power over their feelings and well-being. They allow those others to be in charge, to have control. Their self-worth is based on what they can do for or be to others. It can seem like a mutually beneficial relationship in that one person is happy to get, the other's happy to give. But in the end, it's detrimental to both parties in the same way. Neither the getter nor the giver learns to take care of themselves and develop appropriate internally based self-confidence and self-esteem. So with codependence, that sense of self is distorted. Now, interdependence involves a true mutually beneficial relationship or partnership where both parties influence each other in healthy and appropriate ways. So the relationship partners are allowed to influence each other's thoughts and behavior. The difference from codependence is a matter of degree. So some power over versus nearly complete power over. Influence versus control. Healthy couples are interdependent in that they allow themselves to be influenced by each other. They take into consideration each other's thoughts, feelings, wants, wishes, desires. At the same time, though, no one gets lost in someone else or feels the need to become like the person they're in relationship with. They maintain their own identity. So this can be taken as a sign of mutual respect and understanding. With interdependence, then, that sense of self is present. So what causes codependency? Well, children learn what they live. So codependency starts early based on family rules and patterns. Some of these rules include repression of feelings, maybe a lack of physical affection, doing as you're told versus copying what you see or doing what your parents do, being strong, good, perfect, keeping the peace, being seen and not heard, not being selfish, and being serious versus being playful. Children of dysfunctional families very often become codependents. Now, a dysfunctional family in this sense is characterized by one or more of what I call the 4 A's: abuse, absence, addiction, and ailment. Let's break those down. Abuse. At least one family member perpetrates some form of abuse, whether physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual, sexual, or some combination thereof. With absence, at least one important role model is emotionally or physically absent or inappropriate in some way if they are around. With addiction, at least one family member suffers from an addiction of some kind. And with ailment, at least one family member has a chronic physical or psychological illness, or both. Now, in the latter two categories, addiction and ailment, the bulk of attention is focused on the family member who's ill. The wants, wishes, and desires of the other family members are put on the back burner. Their needs are sacrificed to care for the person who is unwell. As a result, those other family members are neglected in at least one way. Now, this can have dire consequences, not the least of which is a loss of one's identity or sense of self. For example, I once worked with a female codependent patient who was sister to the prodigal daughter. So the prodigal child garnered, even commanded at times, a great deal of attention due to her poor choices and reckless behavior. This included thousands of dollars spent to bail out the prodigal child, emotionally, legally, physically, etc. The parents were over-focused on the sister and refused to set appropriate boundaries, and my patient was neglected in many ways. She worked very hard to be strong and perfect, not make any waves, not draw attention to herself, be the golden child. What she was a codependent, always putting the needs of others before her own. Now, when this didn't work, she developed an eating disorder that nearly killed her. She had finally succeeded in getting her parents' attention, but it nearly cost her her life. Now, the good news is that during the course of her eating disorder treatment, she was able to confront her parents on historical and current issues, and the processes of change and healing began. Amends were made, and she was able to move forward and change the way she saw the world, change the patterns that she had become accustomed to. So if you want more information on codependency, I'm just going to do a plug here real quick. Part 4 of my latest book, Fix Your Freaking Marriage, goes into this in great detail. That's on Amazon or barnesandnoble.com. So there are two types of codependence. One type presents as a passive, submissive person who defers to others and does what others want them to do. The other type actually presents as a confident and self-assured person who wants to and believes they can help others. Some people refer to this type of codependent as having a rescuer, savior, or God complex. Both types of codependent are disavowing themselves, though. They're not being true to themselves, which can create a whole host of problems that we're going to discuss in the future. Now, if you're wondering if you're codependent, an organization called Mental Health America provides a list of 20 questions for self-evaluation. Now, of course, just because you endorse some of these symptoms does not mean you are necessarily a codependent, okay? This is merely provided as a starting point to increase your awareness and help you gather information. If you answer yes to a lot of these questions, I urge you to seek the help of a qualified professional. Okay, so let's look at those questions. Do you keep quiet to avoid arguments? Are you always worried about others' opinions of you? Have you ever lived with someone with an alcohol or drug problem? Have you ever lived with someone who hits or belittles you? Are the opinions of others more important than your own? Do you have difficulty adjusting to changes at work or home? Do you feel rejected when significant others spend time with friends? Do you doubt your ability to be who you want to be? Are you uncomfortable expressing your true feelings to others? Have you ever felt inadequate? Do you feel like a bad person when you make a mistake? Do you have difficulty taking compliments or gifts? Do you feel humiliation when your child or spouse makes a mistake? Do you think people in your life would go downhill without your constant efforts? Do you frequently wish someone could help you get things done? Do you have difficulty talking to people in authority, such as the police or your boss? Are you confused about who you are or where you're going with your life? Do you have trouble saying no when asked for help? Do you have trouble asking for help? And do you have so many things going on at once that you can't do justice to any of them? Codependency, like many other psychological issues, may not be your fault. You may come by it honestly. but it is your problem and one that only you can fix. Remember, each of us is created equal, so you have every right to be treated as such. You know that what you're doing isn't working, so it's time to try something different. In considering behavioral change, always remember, you have nothing to lose. Go for it. Give it a shot. Again, what you're doing isn't working. Now, maybe you're asking yourself, why in the world someone would want to be such a martyr as to be a codependent? Well, codependency is more of a compulsion than a want per se. It's more a subconscious drive than a conscious one. It's also frequently transmitted intergenerationally, so history has a tendency to repeat itself unless you actively do something to change its course. The primary origin of codependency is low self-esteem. So, as in the dysfunctional family examples we discussed previously, a person's identity becomes rooted in what they can do for others. So, self-esteem is based on performance and pleasing others, regardless of what you lose or never develop in the process. This overall concept of self is very important because how we feel about ourselves determines how we treat ourselves, and then how others treat us. If a person doesn't think they're worthy or deserving of happiness, for instance, they may put others before themselves in order to feel better. That is, if they can make someone else happy or do for someone else, it leaves them feeling like they're worth something, and they can gain satisfaction or happiness from that. Now, this may all seem kind of strange. Why would someone want to repeat the horror of what they grew up with, right? Well, again, first, it's rarely conscious, okay? Second, it's familiar and predictable. They know how to do this pattern. After all, normal is what you know. Thirdly, they feel some sense of control or power in being able to rescue another person, which can feed their self-esteem, of course. Fourth, they feel needed and thereby can't be abandoned, or so they think. So codependents seek certain types of relationships in which they're most likely to be needed, and the cycle of personal unfulfillment continues. Now, while it's fine and even generous to do things for others, a pattern of this behavior can lead to big problems. The void that the codependent is trying to fill with their behavior is really unfillable by these means. But they will compulsively keep trying to fill it by doing and being for others. To the extreme, the codependent can start to feel they only live and breathe for the benefit of others. So the compulsion can become an addiction, and the codependent continues down the road to dissatisfaction. Let's take a look at the consequences of codependency. So outside of a poorly formed sense of self, codependent people have a tendency to get involved in unhealthy or toxic relationships. This may include people who are addicts, abusers, unwell physically and or psychologically, or otherwise need rescuing of some sort. This rescuer position gives the codependent control and feeds their need to be needed, thus recreating the dynamics of childhood. Codependents don't get involved with people with healthy boundaries because this doesn't give them the opportunity to be needed and to gain self-esteem from their success in satisfying or helping others. Another consequence of a consistent focus on others is a lack of focus on oneself. This lack of attention to personal health and well-being may have various mental health consequences, and it can even have dire consequences in that the codependent may develop serious medical problems due to not taking care of themselves physically. This can include everything from general health decline to all forms of self-defeating behavior, including self-medication, recklessness, and so on. The codependent may also miss out on important social, academic, occupational, financial opportunities because they're not willing to speak up or focus on self-improvement. Trying to be everything to everyone, the codependent is highly likely to suffer from anxiety and depression. They may also develop resentment, anger, and even bitterness in their relationships when they give and give and give and aren't met with reciprocation or compliance by others, even if they don't actually ask for it or even think they want it. Even though they're givers by nature, everyone has a limit. And the subconscious mind is a powerful thing. Sometimes overgivers start to feel distaste or even contempt toward people they're in relationships with. And contempt is a death knell for any relationship. Not a good sign. If you're seeing yourself in the descriptions I've been giving of the codependent, the first step in overcoming relationship addiction or codependent behavior is becoming aware of why you're behaving the way you are. We talked about the 4 A's previously. You didn't buy this behavior off the shelf at the grocery store, okay? And it's very difficult to change your personal narrative if you don't even understand how it was written in the first place. It also helps to explore and acknowledge the consequences of your behavior, because those can serve as motivation to change when the going gets tough in your change process, as it generally does. Most of the codependents I've worked with were initially unaware of just how problematic their behavior was, or that it was behind the symptoms they were coming in to talk about. Where it was coming from, how it was impacting them, the role in their symptoms, what it was doing to them, even causing physical issues sometimes. Once their behavior was connected to their experiences, a whole new awareness of their downward spiral was created. As I mentioned, people who understand the origins of their behavior are much more likely to change it. To improve self-perception and increase perceived self-value, one of the main goals for therapy with the codependent is to help them understand their inherent worth versus defining their self-worth by what they're able to do and be for others. To do this, we have to address self-esteem issues. If you're a codependent, a good way to get started is to take a look at various areas of your life and see where your confidence may be lacking. Then, using your strengths and some assertiveness training, you can learn to take better care of yourself emotionally and psychologically. Figure out a way to get your first success in this regard, however small, and that will increase your confidence a bit, which then makes you just a tad more likely to go after success again. You're trying to create that positive feedback loop where success breeds confidence, breeds success, breeds confidence. Self-care is also very important for the codependent. You first have to learn that taking care of yourself is not synonymous with being selfish. Rather, it's self-preserving. If you don't take care of you, no one's going to do it for you. This includes taking care of your body, mind, soul, and spirit. And if you wear selflessness as a badge of honor in your life, let me go ahead and take care of that for you. There's no such thing as selflessness. No such thing as altruism. We get something out of everything we do. You're getting something out of the things you're doing, or else you wouldn't keep doing them, however kind or generous they may be and however much it's wearing you out. So it's time to find a different way to feel fulfilled and worthy. Setting and maintaining boundaries is crucial to recovery from codependency. You first have to understand what a boundary is and isn't. Self-protective versus self-destructive. Not selfish, but self-preserving. Again, if you don't take care of you, no one's going to do it for you. You can still help and give to others. You just have to find that middle ground. Now, as you're working in this area, be aware of the phenomenon that I call the pendulum swing. So like a pendulum, behavior can go from one extreme to the other as you search for your own personal middle ground. It's all about balance. So as you replay life events to your therapist, they can help you discern a better way for yourself. Last but not least, learning to let go and be playful and have fun is crucial. Children of dysfunctional families often grow up way too fast because of the circumstances in which they're raised. In caring for the adults in their lives, they often become more mature and psychologically minded than the adults that they're caring for. Many of them don't have much of a childhood to speak of by the time they're through it. They learn to be over-controlled, serious, hyper-mature, even rigid. In these cases, a little bit of regression goes a long way. So if you think you might be codependent, please do get help from a licensed professional. A more fulfilling and less draining life awaits you. And if you want help with codependency in your love relationship, check out chapter 26 in my book, Fix Your Freaking Marriage, on Amazon or barnesandnoble.com.